The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, everybody. This is the first LEGO League team briefing for Washington State. We're going to talk about the hydrodynamics qualifier season in Washington. And with me tonight, you're not going to get to just hear my voice. I'm Susan Martucci, Program Manager and Volunteer Manager at First Washington. With me tonight, we've got Jackie Grimm. Jackie's our team and event specialist. I am sure if you are on this webinar that you have emailed with Jackie. We are also going to have in the latter half of this webinar a visit from Kevin Tirico. He's our regional head referee, and he trains all of the qualifier or all the local head referees. And he will be able to answer game-specific questions. We'll have a little bit of time for that at the end of his presentation before we sign off on the webinar. Also with me, but not pictured, is Chandana Surlu. So she works with Saints Robotics on the east side in Bellevue, and she and her crew of robotics students and volunteers will be running the Bellevue East Side qualifiers. So she is here to join us tonight when we get to the section talking about what the coaches need to bring for team check-in. An agenda tonight, we're going to hopefully get through all of these things in an hour or less. I'm going to give you just a couple of slides and stats on the status of First LEGO League in Washington. Jackie's going to talk about your tournament day, what you should bring. Chandana will help us get through student registration and the team roster. I'll pick it up with awards and advancement and how your team or your volunteers and parents can help. And then we'll kick off with Kevin Tirico, and he will talk about the game and messages from the Washington First LEGO League head referee. And then we will have a couple of slides with questions and resources. This presentation is being recorded. The recording will be uploaded tonight, and it will be posted online on our website. We have a special page called Workshops and Webinars. You can find it on the Team Resources tab, which is all the way over to the right on our firstwa.org website. Under Team Resources, when you choose First LEGO League, you have quite a menu of options, and one of them is Workshops and Webinars. So anything that we have presented this season and recorded will be posted there. As well, I will include a copy of all of these slides, so any pictures or links will be available. So this is the information on how you can find that information on our website. We're going to cover a lot of information, and some slides introduce a topic, and then we get more details on it later. So I've got Jackie and Chandana will be watching the chat and the question box to kind of keep us on our toes in case we are missing anything that seems really unclear. But we will also have time for questions at the end if we don't cover what you needed to hear. You'll have an opportunity to type your questions in the question box, or you can raise your hand. We won't unmute anybody during the presentation, but at the end, if your question is just too complicated, you may ask to be unmuted and ask it verbally. Okay, Washington First LEGO League. Got about 615 teams registered this year in Washington. Of that, about 570 of those teams are going to compete in a qualifier tournament. All of the qualifier tournaments for Washington State are in December in the first 2 weekends. So we use Saturday, Sunday, both the first and the second weekend in December to host all of the qualifier tournaments across the state. The average team size, according to the surveys that the coaches filled out, is 8 students. That's slightly up from last year. And with that, that means we've got about 5,000 students in the state of Washington participating in First LEGO League. For those of you that are on the line and are coaches, this seemed like a really hard season. Whether you're a veteran coach or a new coach, coaching a team, or goodness gracious, coaching multiple teams in First LEGO League can be very, very overwhelming. I put 2 slides in here that you can review later because even one season of working with the FIRST programs, and especially FIRST Lego League, has major impacts long term. FIRST has been doing a longitudinal study about FIRST and its impact on students, which means they have been monitoring and watching the study group of kids for 10 years now. So they have some excellent data, a well-defined study. So if you need to either feel better about what you have done this year or encourage some other folks to get involved in FIRST, some of these stats are pretty amazing, what the kids get out of it. So thank you for giving this opportunity to the kids of our state. It's going to pay dividends down the road. You may not be able to see it now, especially as you prepare for this stressful qualifier, but please know that you are making a difference in the lives of the youth that you are working with this year. So thank you very much. This is another slide that you may find useful to understand just how much they can become engaged in those STEM fields with participation in FIRST. Jackie, want to tell us about our specific state?
Yes, so this year for the qualifier tournaments, we have 18 qualifier tournaments, 5 in Eastern Washington and 13 in Western Washington. The typical tournament size is about 33 teams, but our events this season range in size from 9 all the way up to 44 teams, with the smallest event being in Bay Bridge Island and some of our largest events being in King and Snohomish counties. Here's the typical qualifier schedule. You're going to sign in between 8 and 8:30. Please do not arrive before 8 a.m. Check-in will start promptly at 8 a.m. and not before. You can set up your pit between 8:30 and 9. Judging sessions are normally 9 to noon. Lunch from 12 to 12:30, with the robot game starting around 12:30 and running until about 4, and then awards 4 to 5. So here it's broken down again. Team check-in 8 a.m., no earlier. Most events you will actually not be allowed in the building at all until 8 a.m. So if it's a particularly cold or wet morning, you will have to wait outside or in the car until 8 o'clock when the building opens. Coaches meeting around 8:30, 8:35. 9 to noon, again, is your judging sessions with your lunch break around 12. Opening ceremonies around 12:45, with the game portion of the day starting around 1, and then awards starting around 4:30. So the best time for spectators, so parents, other people from the school, is going to be 12:30 to 4:30. That way they're there for opening ceremonies and then for the robot game portion of the day. There isn't really anything for parents to do in the morning unless they're directly helping with the team. There's not a whole lot going on since the teams are going in and out of judging. The event is free and open to the public, so feel free to have those, kids invite parents, grandparents, other siblings are all welcome to join us. You're going to set your pit up from 8 to 8:30. We'll have a list of suggested items for you to bring. Don't bring extra chairs or any items that won't fit under or on the team's pit table. The pit areas are very crowded, so we can't have extra tables and chairs and things like that set up. And please keep the aisles clear. The team is welcome to go set up in the pit area while the coach is checking in. We don't need the entire team to stand in line to check in, just the coach. So again, check in at 8, not before. The volunteers are prepping the site, getting everything ready, going over their judging schedule for the day. One coach should go to the check-in station with team roster. And then the team and the additional adults can proceed directly to the pit table for setup. all the pit tables will be marked with your team number. So that is one piece of information that you will definitely need to have.
And I just want to emphasize one point here. The team pit numbers are labeled in numeric order, and this has several reasons for it. So I understand many of the teams may be either friends or coworkers with another team, but there is no switching of the pit tables. We have pit maps with your pit numbers laid out for our volunteers, and that's how you will get to and from judging sessions and the robot game session on time. So you need to be in the location that all of our volunteers are expecting you to be at. So please come in and look for your team number, but do not change any team numbers.
Thank you, Susan. So what to bring? Your robot, obviously, extra robot batteries and charger if your robot has rechargeable batteries. Your laptop for changing programs or anything, make sure to also bring your laptop charger. Your project presentation, food, drinks, and snacks, unless it has been specifically said that no outside food is allowed in the building. An extension cord and a power strip. Your team information sheet, which is on our website. 3 copies, one for each judge panel. It helps immensely in judging when you have that sheet with pictures to go back and look at. Also, your team roster, which includes your consent and release for each student. The students should be registered online by the parents in the STIMS, on the STIMS website through firstinspires.org. And then your field setup kit pieces and mat, if you are going to help out with those for judge rooms and also for practice table. We need teams that are willing to share their field kits for the judge rooms. That way when you go to the robot judging or the robot design judge rooms, the kids can run through programs and actually show the judges how they interact with the different missions. Event-specific information. Each event location has a web page with map and details. Team list for each event will be on the web page soon. And the link to the event is also available on the First Washington calendar.
So let's see how we want to do this. One very troublesome item for a lot of coaches to get ready for the event is preparing that team roster. The team roster, in order to be completed, takes both the coach and the parent to do some things online, and they connect and work together. So I've got some brief information and a couple of screenshots. Shandana here is a coach who has registered or helped parents through this registration problem many, many times. So she's here as our resident expert. So I'm going to briefly go through the slides. If you haven't done this yet, you may need to try it before some of the slides make sense. But if you have been trying this and are struggling, please speak up. Others are probably having the exact same problem, and we've got some folks here who can help you get through this. The coach, what you're doing is from your team dashboard, which is at firstinspires.org. You are inviting parents to participate in this registration part. You need their email address. Because you're dealing with students under 13 years old, you are going to have to keep the parents in the loop. That's why you are not asking for an email address from a 9-year-old. The 9-year-old may have an email address, but we're not going to assume any of that at this point. You are going to be inviting parents, and the parents will get their children registered online with the personal information. A recommendation is that you keep a separate list of who you have contacted and invited outside of FIRST, because it's not really going to keep up with your contact list. Now, when you have invited a parent or multiple parents, they need to receive that email at their email address, and they will create something that they'll call a parent account at FIRST. They can then add students to that account. Parents may have multiple students in the FIRST program, and each student can apply to a team number that is in a specific program. So your parents will be applying to your team number in the FIRST LEGO League program. So they're going to need those two pieces of information to understand that they're going into the FIRST LEGO League program and they're applying to a specific team. That team number, while they're 5 digits long these days and not at all easy to remember, it is what this program lives and dies by. It's if you have the team number, everybody can connect the dots with who's who. Whoops, let's go to the next one. So coming back to the coach, once the parent has applied for the students and the students are applying to the team, the coach needs to accept those students on the team. Many coaches may not actually realize that they are in charge of who is and is not on the team. There's often pressure to invite or include students that a coach may or may not feel comfortable with. So it is absolutely up to the coach to decide who comes in through this application process. Once students are on the team, you are going to be printing a roster from your dashboard. This roster causes acres of problems for folks, so that's what we're going to go into from quite a bit of detail in the pictures coming up. Now, any students who are on your team but did not get printed on the roster, that means that whatever registration process online did not get completed and they are not actually on your team behind the scenes on the computer. They will need to be written into the roster. Your roster will print out. There will be some space at the bottom where you may add students right there on the roster handwritten. Any student who is handwritten on the roster, it means that FIRST does not have their parents' signed consent and release form for them to participate in this program. That is a requirement for any student to come to a sanctioned competition. So we've got to have signed consent forms for every student on the premises. Now, any student that was printed on the roster, that means their parents applied, and as part of that application process, they have digitally signed online the consent form. So you do not need consent forms on paper consent forms for any student that printed out on the roster. Their parents have taken care of it online. But any that you had to handwrite in, then you will need to get the parent to sign that consent form. The consent form will be available in your dashboard, the latest updated version of the consent form, and you'll see a picture of that shortly. When you go into manage your youth and your roster, one option is to print a copy of the consent form if necessary. If you get consent forms, paper consent forms, you will want to make a copy of those for yourself. In the event that your team moves forward, advances to either a championship or a semifinal tournament, goes on to another event, they will need to provide another copy of the consent form. So if you have already made copies of that, you're one step ahead. We've got a couple of these tip documents on our website. I have a page called FLL Downloads. That just stands for First LEGO League Downloads, and it's different documents that you can do. Many people like to say there's a lot of trouble with registering the students online. In years past, there was a fair amount of trouble. Year over year, though, they have actually improved the process. And I believe Shandana is going to tell us in a minute that It is not incredibly difficult to register students if you do have parents that have computer access. We know that is most of the people these days. There are certainly regions where it's not common, but a lot of people do have access to a computer. I want to strongly encourage you to get your students registered online. This is the only place that first has a record of the number of students officially participating and what their demographics are. The donors and the legislators that sponsored this program a year or so ago, when we were working on some funding, they did not know why we wanted so much funding, because the only numbers that we could prove were that we had about 1,100 students in the state of Washington. Well, we all knew that wasn't true. We have nearly 5,000 students just in the first LEGO League program alone, and there's 3 other programs in our state. The real number is between 10 and 11,000 students in Washington participate, but without that registration, we can't really prove it to our donors and our legislators and the people that we want to help us pay for this program. So it is going to be a tiny bit challenging to get everybody through it, but please make a substantial effort on both your part and the parents to get these students registered so that we can further the program for the other students in our state. Now, that's kind of how to do it. Do we need, whoops, I need to get mine out of there. Shondana, what do you, should we run through a couple of the pictures? Or do you want to talk through a little bit?
Just talk through this one. Hi, everyone. As Susan mentioned, I'm Chandana Surlu. I'm a mentor with Saints Robotics, which is a high school level team. I'm also the coach for an FTC team, and I was a coach for an FLL team for last 2 years, so I have done this. I have 13 kids in my team and have had to have all parents sign on. For the most part, most parents get through it fine, some don't. If you have any trouble with it, reach Susan and reach out to me. We can help you. It really makes your life a lot easier on the day of competition. Last year, we had 3 or 4 teams that landed up without a roster, and the only instructions we had was, well, they cannot compete without a roster, and you do not want your teams to stress about this after all the hard work that they've done. That's the one big piece I will tell you. It's really worth putting some effort into this so you don't stress them out. The team contacts, if you haven't done this before, you should, as a coach, you should have access to your team information on firstinspires.org. And if you look at, click on your specific team, right on the top, there is an invite team contacts. And right up on the top is parent/guardian. That's what you will use for the most part. And you will need an email address. Susan, if you can move to the next slide. Right, and that's then how you get to it is just the manage contacts.
Looks like I put these out of order for you.
It's okay, it doesn't matter. So this is one of the screenshots of what your dashboard should look like for your particular team. And then manage, if you're going to manage contacts, you can also invite contacts from there. And you can see right below that is a print team roster. So you have a couple of options if you click on the contact options. All right, we'll move, yeah.
Oh yeah, so there's the how to print the team roster. One place, yeah. Right?
Right,
and
so that's really how you go. And then, yes, there you print the team roster. Some of you had asked on the coach's Facebook page, well, I have a bunch of applicants who were denied. Usually these are mistakes. Parents sign themselves as members of the team. They show up in the denied members at the bottom of your roster. You can actually print, if we move to the next slide, Susan, yeah, you can actually click that little button there that says, don't show me any people who were denied, and your roster will look nice and clean with all the green check marks. That's what you want for the day. That's it.
Susan got too click happy here, so we're going to get back just a couple of slides. Okay, so getting rid of those denied applications, and then this last piece, which Shandana provided for us, is information line by line for the coach to talk to the parents, what they expect to see, how they can get through this. Okay, so all of this is going to be in the slides for you to reference after this presentation. This is a screenshot of a 3-page document. It is similar information in a slightly different screenshot format. So there's a coach tip sheet about 3 pages and then a parent tip sheet. Both of those are on our FLL downloads page if you need some additional pictures to help the parents get through this process. Okay. I'm going to call on Jackie for a second. Do we have any questions up to this point that we need to discuss rosters and see how our questions are going?
I actually can't see the question box.
Oh, well, we are going to have to change that because I think there are some questions there. And if you'll give me just a moment, we will make Jackie able to see and manage those questions for us. And we are going to do the same thing to Kevin Tirico. And so we should be set with you guys. Okay, so let's hopefully we'll get through the questions real quick. So if a coach has 2 teams, they may not be next to each other in the pits. That is correct. If they do not have sequential numbers or there's a bunch of teams in between them, they may not be next to each other. But you'd be surprised, are the team numbers in our state go from 2 digits down at 58 all the way up to something like 36,000. So there's only going to be between 25 and 45 teams at your event. So if you have 2 teams, it is also highly likely that you may be near each other and able to do that. If you can bring your mission mat and your models to work on the practice table or to work in one of the judging rooms, that would be very much appreciated by all the event organizers. At the end of the presentation, we'll show you how to sign up and let us know that you are going to be providing some of that information or some of those materials. You will not, however, be able to lay your mat on the floor in your pit to work on missions. All mats and missions will either be on practice tables provided by teams or in the judge room. They will not be in the hallways and the floors. We'll keep all the floors clear in the pits. And we also do not have private practice tables at any of the events. So please don't bring that stuff in unless it's preparing for the practice table. Our event organizers don't like to have to be mean to enforce any rules. Where can you find slides? We'll announce that at the end. It's on our website. No other information is needed on the roster besides what prints out, which is the student's name. First, keeps all that personally identifiable information private, even from the coaches and from the organizers. So the only thing that pops up for the coach will be the student's name. Between matches, oh yes, they can watch other matches. Certainly, that's part of the fun of it. And our pits are going to be a little bit of a crazy place. Okay, so Jackie should be able to monitor that. If you have questions, feel free to type them in. Some of them I skipped over. We're going to get to several of those questions in the rest of the presentation here. So what's going to happen at the tournament is your team is going to be evaluated. There were 3 primary elements in the first LEGO League program: the project, which includes a presentation, your robot design and construction, and then core values, behaving as a team. You'll be evaluated separately in each area and then all together over the course of the day. The evaluations are extremely subjective. They are done by a panel of volunteer judges. The way your team is evaluated at one event could be very different from the way it would be at a different event with a different panel of judges. We are very appreciative of our volunteers who come to us from the community and from other FIRST programs, and sometimes their parents and relatives. All of our volunteers are doing their best to get engaged with the program with you. So we thank them, but want you to be aware that these are subjective evaluations done just kind of on a personal opinion about how the kids did in that 1 5 to 10 minute period. The awards that are given out at the end of the tournament are determined by these judging panels. So the judges will interview all of the teams at the event in their various areas, and then they actually do not get to watch the matches. Sorry, any judges who are volunteers on the line. They are back in a private room doing what's called judge deliberations, and they're deciding who gets what awards. Judges, to help them out, are given rubrics. These rubrics are public. They are available on the First Inspires website, and we have actually posted them on our website as well. Please do not go to an event without having read and had the students read through these rubrics, because that is exactly how they're going to be evaluated at the event. Just a reminder of our 3 areas with the robot, core values, and presentation. You'll sometimes see those pictures representing them at various areas. We've gone over the basic schedule, so this is just a reminder that your morning tends to be judging. A schedule for each team is going to be provided at team check-in on the day of the event. As I'm sure many of you are aware, we can print the schedule as far in advance as we like, but often there is an emergency or a team dropping out. And so we've regenerated the schedules, and now we just don't do it until closer to the event. So each team will get a schedule that will tell them where they need to be for each of their judging, what time they need to be for each of their judging sessions. They do not, however, leave the pits and go on their own to these sessions. Teams are retrieved at their pit table, which is kind of their base of operations. So we have volunteer runners. We sometimes call them pit runners or cuers, or just volunteer runners. Each pair of judges will have a runner working for their area. And so if they are running behind schedule, we don't want the team sitting out in the hallway or getting lost or getting upset because things are running late. So the volunteer runners will keep everybody informed, and they will come and retrieve the team and lead them to their judging room and help them know when to go into the room. We learned that takes a lot of stress off the teams. Often these events are being held in high schools or middle schools, which are often a bigger school than our first LEGO League students are used to. So we do not want them wandering around worried about which room they need to be in. We'll take care of that with them. Each of the judging sessions is going to be 10 minutes long. They have a slightly different format in each of the sessions, but they are all 10 minutes long. Additional stuff going on in the morning, the competition tables that the referees and head referee are going to set up and monitor at the event. They will be open for teams to practice on, or to calibrate sensors, or to just come out and talk to a referee. A typical time that the practice would be open would be around 9:30 to 11:30. The referees are involved in setup and the coaches meeting in the morning, and they will make an announcement which will be broadcast to all teams when the practice tables will open, the competition tables will open for practice, and then they will generally shut down just before lunch, and there will be no activity on those competition tables from the time they shut down before lunch until the robot games begin after the opening ceremony. So there will not be practice time on the competition tables between about 11:30 and 1. So you'll plan to do that in the morning. Certainly the students may talk to the referees during this practice time. This is a great time to get clarifications or ask a referee if something's legal or not. Hopefully they know that by now. Kevin Trico is on the call with us here, and he will be giving you some tips and guidance in just a few moments. Someone from the team should be in the pit area at all times. If the team has decided not to be there because they want to go watch some matches, or maybe the team has gone to visit other teams in the pits, or maybe they're at the practice table, there are many good reasons for the teams, most of the team, to actually be away from the table, but we run a very tight schedule. So somebody needs to be at that pit table. If it's a spare parent, a sibling if they're not too young, but a high school sibling, somebody who can guide the runner to where this team is, so they could be pulled off the practice table or in from an area to move on to either their next judging session or their next robot round. So that is very important for us. The afternoon is going to be kind of all about the robot. The judges are back in their room talking about awards. The main robot with all the robot game is held either in a very large area or usually the main gym in one of our schools. There are 3 rounds to the robot contest, so we'll run all the teams through round 1, and then they'll start again. There's some random orders in there, so the first team will not always be first. There'll be a different order in each round. They'll run 3 rounds in the robot contest. The best single score determines who is going to be the winner of the Robot Performance Award. In the same way that the teams were brought to judging sessions by the runners, the teams will also be brought to the gym area, and we call it queued up. We may have them queued up to 3 matches early. They'll monitor that depending on the flow of how well things are moving or not moving. We won't have the kids standing around for an excessive period of time, but if we're moving relatively on pace, then every few minutes we will be turning over the fields and resetting a new team. So it does move pretty fast. And then teams go back to the pits after the match. They may have an extended period of time of 30 or 40 minutes. If they're not stressing or working on the robot, absolutely come out into the stands and watch some of the other teams. There's going to be a lot of fun robots out there to watch. Just a reminder that Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are not allowed. The conflicts that could happen would be horrible, especially if it was on your robot. So the awards. We want to give these kids awards for what they've done. So there's 2 varieties. If you're at a qualifier tournament that has less than about 24 teams, you'll get what's called a standard set of awards. So there will be a regional champion. That will be the top award at the event. We'll go over that criteria in a little bit. And then the judges will recognize a team in each of the 3 core areas: project, robot design, and core values. And then because the judges always find a team that they feel deserves special recognition, we give them a judges award. And this is always fun to see who the judges like to recognize. It's an optional award. It's not given at every tournament, but I must say in Washington, it is given at most tournaments. And then the Robot Performance Award. This is not a judged award. It is earned by the robot working on the table objectively with the best of 3 scores. Wanted to make a comment, however, about the robot's performance. It's awarded based on those highest points, but only teams that have participated in all 3 areas of the program are eligible to win this award. So if a team spends all of their time on the robot and does not do a project or does not go to the teamwork judging to participate kind of in the well-roundedness part of it, then they would not actually be eligible for the Robot Performance Award. Teams will only win 1 judged award. There may be a team that is great in 2 areas. The judges will have to choose which area they would like to award them for, and then they will choose another team that satisfies the criteria. Like I said, the judges award is optional. You'll see on the right side for qualifiers that are greater than 24 teams, we take the 3 core areas of project, robot, and core values, and they are expanded into some specific focus points of of that part of the program. And these correspond directly with what's on the rubrics. So if you want to know what the judges are looking for when they're looking into the research part of the project, that would be part of the rubric. So that's the only difference between the standard and the expanded, is that they give a few more awards and recognize slightly more specific areas. But we always have the regional champions and the Robot Performance Award at every event. The Champions Award, this is considered the most prestigious award in the First LEGO League program. And this is a team who demonstrates core values and just kind of excels, has high achievement in all of the categories. So you're going to have a project, a good robot, a great team. In addition, the robot must perform on the table, and it must perform in the top 40% of all of the teams at that event. So it is an event-specific hurdle, but the champion not only needs to be good in all areas, but the robot has to perform at the event on that day. Advancement is similar to the Champions Award because it uses the Champions criteria. So when we say advancement, we are doing qualifier tournaments, is what they're called, in December. But we do have 2 state championships. We have an Eastern and a Western state championship. These are held in late January or early February. In Eastern Washington, so those teams that are east of the Cascade Mountains is kind of our region for called Eastern Washington. They have enough teams there that the winners, or the teams who advance from a qualifier tournament, will go directly to the Eastern State Championship. And I'll have a slide to kind of show you how that plays out. In Western Washington, we have so many more teams that we actually have another layer. So from a qualifier tournament, we will have semifinal tournaments in mid-January. And the teams from the semifinals will be the ones eligible to compete at the state championship. To advance, again, the team would have to participate in all areas of the program, which includes the project, including all required sections of the project. They cannot have what's called a red core values or disqualifying behavior. So at the tournament, they do need to be on good behavior, core values, gracious professionalism, and all that. And they need to perform reasonably well in all 3 judged areas. They do not need to be superstar, rock star, top of the pack in all 3. They just need to perform well in all 3. So the advancement is looking for that well-rounded team who has kind of tried it all and does reasonably well in all areas. In addition to participating and having all the criteria, their robot also has a performance hurdle. But for those of you that are veteran coaches, just a heads up here that this hurdle has changed significantly. To get the actual Champions Award, the team would have to be in the top 40% at their tournament. But to advance, a team needs to be in the top 75%. So the top 3/4 of teams are eligible. This was a change. In the past, the advancing teams also had to be in the top 40%. There's been a lot of discussion for the last couple of years, and the judges felt like they were leaving out some well-rounded teams on a rather arbitrary number of the robot performance. So what's happened is they've expanded the robot performance hurdle to include more teams, and this gives the judges more flexibility to find some of those well-rounded teams that are pretty good in all areas. This is a slide to show which events in our qualifier system this year are feeding into the Eastern Washington Championship Tournament. That tournament is scheduled for January the 13th, which is a Saturday, at Eastern Washington University in Cheney, Washington, which is outside of Spokane. The events contributing to that, the state for us is divided in about 10 regions. We've given them relatively geographic names to help with that. But it may seem unfamiliar to you when we talk about different regions of the state. but the Richland-Pasco area are called the Central South. So they have 2 qualifiers there that will feed into it. The Eastern qualifiers are in Spokane area. They have a Saturday and a Sunday event. And then a new event this year is our Wenatchee qualifier. They're in the where Wenatchee is, called the central part of the state. So these 5 qualifier tournaments happening on both the 2nd, the 9th, and the 10th will all feed teams into the Eastern Washington Championship tournament. That tournament will be a tournament of 30 teams. So between these 5 qualifiers, they will advance forward. It turns out to be about 24% of the teams will advance to get our 30 teams at the event. The specific number for your event is directly related to how many teams are at the event. So the judge advisors will have these numbers, but it's right around 24%, plus or minus a little, because we can't send half teams. So we either had to round up or round down to send a whole number of teams. So we've got a similar slide here for advancement to the Western Washington Championship. We've got tournaments spread out throughout kind of the I-5 corridor in Western Washington. So 5 qualifiers this first weekend on the 2nd and 3rd, and then 8 qualifiers on the 9th and the 10th. Those 13 qualifiers will feed into 4 semifinal tournaments. So the qualifiers range in size. I think Jackie told us like 9 to 44, but semifinal and championship tournaments are set at 30 teams. This works for our judges. It works better for our volunteers. And it's kind of the maximum number of teams that we want a judge to see in a day. We allow that number to go a little bit higher at the qualifier tournaments. There's a much wider range of abilities of teams, but once we get into semifinals and championships, our judges actually have a much harder time determining the awards. So we need to give them a few less teams to look at, or they just get brain fried. They don't like to do that. To advance from the qualifiers, it'll be closer to 27% of the teams, again, with some rounding errors. And then the semifinals will be 30 teams, and the state championship in Western Washington, which will be February the 11th. And that is not Super Bowl Sunday. That is the Sunday after. That will happen in Kent. Just a summary of those advancing teams. The semifinals, they're on the 20th and 21st. 3 of them are on Saturday. 1 is on a Sunday. Those advancing teams will be randomly placed into events with the strongest preference starting with geography and filling our southernmost and northernmost events with the geographically closest teams. And then the teams basically in King County and North Pierce and southern Snohomish, they're mostly going to end up randomly placed depending on where the events end up. The teams are going to be notified of their event placement before Christmas, so the target is no later than December the 20th, which is the Wednesday before Christmas, on which event. It will either be on the 20th or 21st if it's a semifinal event, and it will be on the 13th if it is the Eastern Washington Championship event. So teams put those 3 dates in your calendar depending on what's relevant to you. Jackie, how are we doing on questions? Can you see questions now? Any issues with advancement?
I only see the 2 that were already answered.
Okay, very good. Our events, we need volunteers. We're coming into our first weekend of events. Each qualifier tournament that we're hosting needs on average about 50 volunteers. For the 18 qualifiers, we'll do the math. We need about 900 volunteers to work for us on these 4 days. About half of those volunteers need to be adults. That's the position of judges and referees. Almost all of the other roles at the event can be staffed by students, and often these are our high school students on teams like the Saints Robotics who are hosting our East Side qualifiers. If we can, we try to get a FIRST Robotics competition team of high schoolers to support every event so that students get to interact with other kids interested in the same things. You need to think, how many volunteers did your team recruit? We've got about 500 and some teams competing, and we need about 450 judges. So that's about 1 volunteer per team. We have asked each team to supply us at least 1 volunteer. You'll be asked who your volunteer's name is when your team checks in. So that is another piece of the puzzle in addition to your roster. Coaches, you will be a much better coach in the future if you volunteer to judge at any event where your team is not competing. It is fascinating and very educational for a coach to interview 11 other teams from a wide variety of circumstances and either listen to talk to them or see their presentations. It's very eye-opening. And then working with the other judges and discussing teams to see how the teams are really evaluated in this subjective process behind the scenes. This is not really public information, as the deliberations will not be shared outside of that room. But it's also not totally secret either. We highly encourage coaches and people who want to know more about FIRST to get involved behind the scenes. Send your volunteers to your firstinspires.org website. They will have their own volunteer profile page, and they can pick events from there. And we mentioned it before, in addition to volunteers, we need equipment. We have 18 qualifiers going on in 4 days, so that is a lot of resources. We've bought 50 field kits this year, and still we are spread thin. We send competition tables for a 30-team event, for example. There will be 4 of the tables out there in pairs, so we call it 2 competition tables. But it'll be 4 of the 4x8 built tables for competition. So we've worked with our events to get those sent out across the state. Everybody will have similar competition tables. However, practice tables and judge room tables, we do not have the resources or the storage to handle that with the volume of teams we have in our state. So it is up to the teams to bring and help provide that information or that equipment. The competition tables that need to be built, they're regulation built. That way everybody's competing on the same type of table. The practice tables, it is best if they are built to competition level, but if you have a portable table to hold a mat, that would be appreciated. The judge room tables, it would be nice to have competition ones, but they are not required. So again, if you have a portable or foldable table, it is definitely frustrating for teams to want to show the really cool thing that their robot can do, but they get into a judge room that doesn't have tables. So please reach down into your team or your resources and see if you could help make that available to the other teams in your area. At the bottom of this slide, and it will go out in the next coach email, there is a link where you can indicate what your team is able to bring to an event, whether it's just a mat and models or a table, a portable table, a competition regulation, whatever you're able to bring. Also recognize that some of our events are held one on Saturday, and in the same location we run another event on Sunday with new volunteers, but it's the same equipment. Shandana is running one of those at the east side. The Glacier Peak High School in the North Sound area is running one of these. Ballard, Auburn Mountain View, Spokane. These are double day events for our site hosts. They'll set up either on Friday night or very early Saturday morning, and they'll leave the setup there. So what is there on Saturday would hopefully be there on Sunday. So if you have the ability and could loan tables or kits and things for both days at some of these events, that is also appreciated. It is also welcome, though. Thank you if you can. Just bring it for your day that you are there with your team. So you'll have the link and able to do that. And now he's been waiting patiently. We've got Kevin Tirico, and he is going to talk to us as the head referee. And I've got slides for him whenever you're ready to go, Kevin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, awesome.
So,
hi, everyone. As Susan mentioned, I am Kevin Tirico. I am the head referee for FLL for the state of Washington. There's my email address right there. Some of you have already taken advantage of the fact that you can email me any questions you have about the robot game. I'm not a great resource for judging. I try and include that in all of my responses when people ask me about judging and send them to Susan and Jackie. So I am going to cover a few things briefly here that I wanted to kind of drive home to all coaches, and then there will be a question and answer at the end. Traditionally, what happens is I get about 20 to 30 minutes of questions at the end of these, so everyone does not need to stick around for those if you are very confident in the rules related to what your team is doing. So starting with some field setup notes, clarifying some things that are not clear, or there might be two sources that slightly disagree. These are things that I have clarified up through the head referees who will be judging World Festival in Houston and St. Louis this year, and in some cases all the way to Scott Evans, game designer. One of them is that the lever on the filter bottle, which is a mission I expect a lot of teams to try, the instructions say lift it up and you pull the slider out, and then it doesn't say do you leave it up or does it fall back down. That has been clarified that that starts down, so you do have to push the slider pretty much all the way in order to get it to drop and to fall. I noticed this at one of our scrimmages that we held at Microsoft maybe a month or so ago. It didn't seem to affect teams whether it was up or down, so hopefully this won't impact any of you. The clouds on the rain mission model, the cloud portion with the lightning bolt on it that starts facing east, not west. There's a picture in the field setup guide with it both ways, but the text does say two with the clouds facing east, and that is correct. I have gotten a few questions so far about the water treatment model. It is finicky. I am the first to admit that. I think First Global also admits that, but I have spent a lot of time checking and testing every field that I send to one of these events, and they all work now. However, they're going to be put in boxes, shipped, cars, teams use them all day, things get bumped. So they may not work all the way through the competition. I have been and am instructing the referees that if your robot goes out, properly interacts with and pushes that yellow lever down, holds it long enough that the mission model should have completed its actuation, which is approximately a second, and for some reason, the mission model being a little finicky, it doesn't work, then the referee is going to activate the model by hand. They'll dump the sludge off, they'll kind of push the sludge off and kick out the big water, and your team will be given points for completing that mission, and then you can go about the rest of your run. So I know that that's been a question that has come up quite a lot. Next slide, please. Updates. I didn't check today, but I checked yesterday at midnight, and the latest updates that I've seen came out on November 7th. Please, please, please review these. I was actually somewhat surprised that we got so many updates this year compared to last year, and they actually made some really big differences, in some cases really beneficial to teams, that give teams a lot of more leeway than they may have had in past years. Unfortunately, that means that there's probably a couple minutes of me talking on the presentation that I gave on October 19th, which the slides are still online, and the whole thing was recorded, so you can review that if you cannot already see it. There is a short portion of that presentation, I think about an hour and a half. Maybe there's 5 minutes in there that is now straight up wrong because an update has superseded it. And that has to do with equipment that's team supplied when the robot gets interrupted, but is generally in the team's favor. So if you followed my instructions and rulings exactly as they were in the presentation, you would be only pleasantly surprised. when you get to your qualifiers. So I generally got good feedback on that presentation. I think it goes to a lot more detail than I'm going to be able to go through here. Obviously, I'm not going to make you all sit through another hour-and-a-half presentation and Q&A session. Next slide, please. So one of the cool things about my job is I am in the position where I get to decide leniencies that we are going to apply statewide that aren't specifically in the rules, but that make a lot of sense for everyone. And one of those is that teams are allowed, and I will say encouraged, to shut down their robot when they are done, even if the match hasn't ended. If your team has completed all the missions it's going to complete, you can still end up with an awesome score and have a minute and a half left in the match. You don't need to leave your robot on with its motors running, sitting against the wall, or worse, sitting against a mission model and trying to tear apart the field. So teams are allowed to turn their robot off, leave it entirely in place, and say that they're done for the match. It's best to let the referee know slightly before you do that, so the referee can check to make sure that you aren't about to, maybe, let it run for a second longer. You may get a mission here. They'll provide you some feedback there. But it works really well for both teams who aren't draining batteries and referees, because the robots aren't tearing apart the field when they aren't doing anything or potentially unscoring some of their own things. The one thing you can't do with this is that you can't use it as a precision stop. There aren't really a lot of precision stop opportunities this year, but that means you can't wait and, right at the perfect second, turn the robot off to get something in a perfect scoring position. That would still count as a penalty. But I do think this is something that will help teams generally. Also, teams are allowed to ask referees to grab their robot if it is out of reach. I will say that some of our referees are shorter than some of our students. So we get some really tall 8th graders, taller than myself included there. But if a robot is really hard to reach, especially for some of our younger students, might be a little bit shorter still, they can ask the referee to grab the robot for them. It will still be an interruption, and so it will still have all those things that go with it, penalties, potential loss of mission models, but the students don't need to jump onto the table to try and grab the robot. They can ask the referee to do that. Next slide, please. Table and field disclaimers. As Susan's trying to get these to you and hammer them home now so that you aren't surprised when you show up at the competition. As Susan mentioned, the competitions are hosted all over the state and pretty much exclusively by volunteers. We don't have, really a professional crew that goes out and runs, one event after another. So there are going to be some variations event to event, but we work really, really hard to try and keep events themselves consistent. So every team that is at an event is dealing with the same situations. Teams are warned to prepare for variations. That's in the rules. It's GP4, so it's literally the fourth thing on the list. Again, that every team will be dealing with very similar conditions at a given event. Please know that our fields are not going to be as flat, and probably they're going to be a little bit slicker than the fields you have been practicing on. Warn your students of this. Mentally for it. Every year we have teams who have to do a little bit of program adjustment. So be prepared for that. Every year we see teams that have to do that and still go on to put up, top 3 or 4 high scores in an event and advance. So it is not something that's going to prevent you from moving on. But as Susan mentioned, we order a lot of brand new kits. We have to build all those mission models, and then we have to make sure those fields we get them as flat as we possibly can. This year we actually put them between a couple sheets of plywood and left them under a table for about 2 months to try and get them flat so that they'd be as flat as possible for you guys, but we ship them rolled up. So there'll be a little bit more curls along the edges, and they're probably a little bit slicker because they haven't been out and haven't had robots arriving all over them yet. So fields will be a little bit different, but again, everyone is working a very similar situation. Next slide, please. Field tables. Susan kind of touched about this. We ship tables all over the field. We're using the Gator board tables again this year. They were used, I think, at almost every event last year. The tables use the shorter walls, which is using a 2x3 instead of a 2x4. So if you're counting on a sensor hitting the very top of your 2x4 wall, or seeing the very top of your 2x4, you may find that our walls are an inch shorter than that. So you may want to adjust accordingly. Tables are one of the great things about them, and it allows us to host all these events, is that they're lighter and more flexible than plywood, to get us into these venues with enough time to set up without huge manpower, and also allows us to transport the tables all over the state. But that's a little bit of flexibility if you have any really large portions of your robot that move. I haven't seen any really this year that cause this. Those large movements can cause the table to bounce slightly differently. It was a bit of an issue last year with teams kind of aggressively interacting with the refrigerator. But there aren't many mission models this year that I think that would be an issue. The other thing is, please remind your students not to lean on the table. The tables aren't connected together, so there's nothing really counterbalancing a table when a student leans on it. And so an overeager student could very easily flip a table or jump a table edge a foot or two in the air, and no robot is going to be good enough to run properly when the table's being bounced around. And then that is not a situation where, if your team is doing that, that's not something where we're going to rerun the match, because that was something that the students did essentially to themselves. So, a good thing to practice as you're getting ready for these competitions, having the students, not putting their weight on the edges or the surface of the table. Next chart, I think that may be it. Oh, nope. Susan has covered some of this already. We are going to open the competition fields for practice. Try and get them open as early as possible, depending on the venue. Usually that's sometime between 9 and 9:30, which may be right after the coaches meeting, which starts at 8. Those are first come, first served. We will enforce a time limit if there are teams waiting. The competition area rules apply because this is the competition area. That means only one robot controller. So that means you can't bring 2 copies of your robot. It means only 4 motors total, and it means no wireless or wired communication. So if you need to do programming, you need to go back to your pit to do that, or you need to go at least outside the doors of the competition area. Competition rounds will be after lunch. Generally, we'll run up to about 4:30. Then we'll have our award ceremony. We do not post the scores after the event online. So if you want some documentation of how your team did, we'll be running the scoreboard throughout the day. You're welcome and encouraged to take photos of that for posterity's sake. You may also ping the Facebook group if you forgot to, and see if somebody is willing to share their photos with you. But I will not be able to tell you your team's score, and no one will post the scores to First Call afterwards. We will eventually post the awards, but we will not post all the team's scores.
That's correct. And I'll just add, for the score posting on the event pages that were specific for each event on our website, we are in the process of putting up the attending teams that will be at the bottom of the page. And then right as we get the scores posted, usually a couple of days after the event, they will be at the top of the event page. So you'll get kind of a complete snapshot of that event, where it was, who was there, and what awards were won. Okay, do you have another one?
And just a point of clarification there. It is the awards that will be posted. Robot scores will not be posted.
That is correct.
Just the teams that won awards. So there's no documentation of the scores. I have no way of pulling it up after an event.
And neither does anybody at First Washington. We do not save that information. We do not use it anytime after the events. Okay. Do you have another one? Oh, yes.
Yes. So we talked a little bit about this, and generally referees and judges. Referees are there to maintain a fair competition environment. We aren't trying to, show we have spent so much time thinking about the rules and trying to catch teams in, a nuance of the rules. We are trying to apply the rules fairly to all the teams. We're also there to try and help the kids have a good time. No referee is excited about telling a team they didn't earn points if they got a penalty. Teams are encouraged to ask referees questions, especially in the practice rounds in the mornings. Referees may be able to give you some guidance to help your robot run better or to make it compliant with the rules. I believe every referee in the state this year is a volunteer, so none of us are paid by First Law. So please keep that in mind in any interaction. We are all giving up our weekends, and most of our referees are going to end up giving 3 or 4 weekend days and probably a couple of weeknights preparing. So we are putting a lot of time in addition, just as the teams are getting ready for this. We all make mistakes, myself included. There is a question box for students to come ask the event head referee if they have a question. So no decision at an event can be made by just one referee. There's always a final decision requires at least 2, the table referee who made it initially and the head referee who would come over and have that discussion with the team or talk to the team in the question box. Next slide, please. For anything related to the game, we're trying to empower the students here, so we want the students to be asking the questions to the referees. That does mean that we don't want parents asking questions of referees in the question box. Trying to ask, referee how their day is, or, what we had for lunch, or if the Seahawks are going to win. All those things are fine, but game-related questions we really want to hear from students. And that also means parents are not involved in the score sheet review process, and they especially should not be arguing with a referee. That occasionally happens, and it's usually students understand the rules better than a lot of the parents. They spend so much time working on them. So parents are allowed to listen. I'm okay with that, especially if it's a complicated question, but we ask the parents do not kind of insert themselves into the conversation. It's really a conversation between the referees and the students. Now I think that was everything I have. Nope, I lied again, sorry. So tips for improving competition performance. I have never mentored a team, but every team that asks me for advice, this is one thing I always tell them, is try and have a good first match that's a very good baseline and a floor for the performance of your team. Even if that means you don't quite try and run everything at full speed. Maybe you run, one fewer mission than the maximum you can do, and that allows you to take extra time and make sure you set every mission properly and get the jigs and the robot aligned properly. And so your first match of the day, you go in and you put up a score that's 3/4 of the maximum possible score your team can have. And then from there, everything else is an opportunity to improve on. If you go full out on that first match, everyone's nerves can be high, and sometimes that doesn't go very well. And remember, while the robot competition is going on, the judges are deliberating, and the judges will have an opportunity to see the scores from every match normally, but they are discussing that entire time, and it's all in my opinion, it's always better to be above that 75% threshold, and maybe even near the top of the pile when the judges are discussing about which teams deserve awards and deserve to advance, than to be below it. Like, yes, you can put up a great score in your third match and still advance, but I think it's a lot easier to do if you've been above that threshold the entire time. And moving that threshold down to 75% makes it maybe a little bit less important than it was when it was at 50 or 40, but I think still a good idea. And then please practice on the competition field. I'm always sad when I see competition fields in the morning that aren't being used, because every team can benefit from practicing on a competition field. And kind of going with this, if you tune something on one of our competition fields, don't go to a practice field and then retune it on a field that a team supplied, because you went through that extra effort to make sure it works on the competition field. Don't undo that work by adjusting it for another field that isn't one of the competition fields. Next slide.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, so we kind of gave you where do you want to go for questions. Jackie's our team and event specialist. So if you've contacted us, you've probably been talking to Jackie this season. She will be able to answer most of your questions or can help you get to the right resource. If you're concerned about the volunteer issues or program specific things like advancement, I can field some of those questions for you if we haven't answered them here. And then the game questions, if it has to do pretty much anything about the challenge, the tables, the mats, the missions, what's legal, what's not. Kevin is monitoring his email address at FirstWA, which is the FLL head referee at firstwa.org. We got several places there. I'm previewing some of the questions. It looks like most of the questions that have cropped up right now have to do with the game. I'm going to try and scan through again real quick and see if there's anything else that is not a Kevin question. It looks like we've got most of them. The resources is going to be on the next page. That's going to have our FLL downloads page, which is going to answer several questions in this list, such as where's the team information sheet or some of the tip sheets. It will also have directions for how to get to this webinar and the slides. And there, let's see. Event information is very much delayed, and for all volunteers who are on this call, thank you for your patience, even if you don't have any. The volunteer coordinators and event staff are very far behind. It seems like we needed another week. I'm sure your teams feel about the same way. So the big events that are happening this weekend are at Glacier Peak and at Auburn Mountain View. We have a couple of smaller events going on in Richland and in Camas. Varying degrees of information have gone out. The information that's on the website is generally geared for teams, but does let volunteers know where to show up and to come starting at 7 o'clock. Volunteer coordinators should be getting information out to volunteers either tonight or tomorrow. We've got a lot of folks putting effort into that. Thank you if you are volunteering. There are some questions about how strict we're being with the volunteer requirement. The expectation is that we would trust you to do the very best that you can and make a substantial effort. We do understand that some of the events, for instance, like Wenatchee or Camas or Mount Vernon, some of these are more remote than others, so the volunteers may not have an opportunity to volunteer at a second event, which is one of our requirements to be a judge. You can offer to help out at the event with setup, tear down, and practice field management. Some events are also still looking for referees. That we don't need a ton of referees, but we can have some affiliated coaches and parents. They just will not referee their team. It's not a preferred option, but those are some ways that coaches and parents of teams in our more remote areas can help and volunteer. If you are in one of the areas that has an event on 2 days in the same weekend, or for goodness sakes, if you are in King County or Snohomish County or Pierce County, we have events all over the place on multiple days. So you should be able to get to something within a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. There's enough events that you should be able to find a second one. This year, we will not penalize a team by advancement, but next year, we're looking into making it a hardcore requirement. We're having a great deal of difficulty getting our events staffed with volunteers. We're going to be growing this program exponentially in this state, so we have got to come up with a mechanism to get the volunteers in place. This is a 99.9% volunteer-driven program. You've seen it as a coach. I'm sure you're overworked as a coach. It is unfortunate if the coach also has to be the volunteer at the event. That is what many do just to learn a little bit. I'm sorry if you don't have the support in your school or community or the parents of the students that somebody else was able to step up, we try to encourage them. You can try to encourage them. We're open to a lot more ideas if you have them on volunteer recruitment so that we can get these events staffed for the kids. They are so proud, so proud to show what they have done to somebody who cares. So we need to get those judge rooms staffed with adults who can show that they care what these kids did this season. So we're struggling to figure out how to do it, and we do not want to be punitive, but we've been begging for several years and we're not getting the traction we need. So feed me your ideas on how we can do better at that. That's most of the questions for me. Can you see the questions, Kevin? Have you previewed some of those?
Yeah, I was trying not to interrupt you. I'm typing fast and furious over here, but will be much happier to go to a talking-based Q&A. I can talk fast and I can type. There are still a couple up here that I did not know that I was qualified to answer. Let me quickly go. Where to download the team info sheet? Is that on the First Wall website or is that on US First? Or both?
It should be on both, but if you want some easy stuff, I've put the slides up now. The page is called FLL Downloads. I put it under Team Resources. So if you are heading to firstwa.org, all of the team resources that you're concerned about are on the far right of the menu. I know it's hard with mobile to get around our site. We will upgrade one day, but not today. So get to the Team Resources tab. We have menu options for each program plus some other stuff. So you're looking for the first Lego League. Sometimes you hit the junior by accident, but look for the first Lego League, and then you will have a menu of options. It will have our event web pages, workshops, and webinars, which is where all of these recordings are. And then something called FLL Downloads is a kind of a landing page for a bunch of resources that we have collected that you might find useful. So check those there. The event map and details also on our website. Start with Team Resources, go to First Lego League, and you can go to the events and your specific location. So that's where some of those are. Was there any other question that's not game related?
There are a couple, but I feel mostly qualified to answer them, so I'm going to start talking, and you can correct me where I'm wrong.
Okay, so, we can do that.
Question from Sarah is the pit just a place where your team is supposed to be during the competition, like a home base? It's also storage, so what most teams will do with their pit table is they'll put a poster up describing some of what they did for their project, and they may take that with them when they go to their project presentation. It's also a good place to store extra Legos. It can be food if that's allowed in the pits at your venue. Spare parts, totes sometimes, but it's kind of the place where all of our cuers, whether they're coming to pick you up for a judging session or for the robot competition, are going to come get you. So it's always good to have someone at your pit who knows where your team is. Sometimes that's a parent, sometimes it's the team itself. Sometimes it can be a lot of sitting and standing still for judges for some teams. So sometimes just being able to go back to your pit and talk and kind of be kid works as well. What is the robot judging room? So the robot judging room is an opportunity for the students to show their robot design to judges. And so they'll talk a little bit, hopefully, about the strategy, about how they designed mechanically the robot, what they did from a programming perspective, some programming concepts they're using. Those are the three kind of areas of that rubric which everyone should look at. Gratuitous plug there. And hopefully, if enough teams bring field kits and mission model sets, there will actually be a competition-like field in the judging room so the team can demonstrate their robot. And they normally won't run through their entire mission, especially if they use the whole 2.5 minutes, but they may run some of their favorite programs, so it's a technical presentation to the judges about the robot. and then those judges will, deliberate and decide on some awards based solely on how teams thought about, designed, and programmed the robot, even if the robot wasn't one of the top 3 or 4 scorers at an event. Next up, how will core values be evaluated this year? Will there be teams need a core value board, or will there be some other method? That's from Randall. Core values is done in the judging session as well. There will be a core values challenge of some sort. There will also be a little bit of a Q&A with the judges. It's pretty informal compared to, say, the project presentation. And so, it's possible to prepare for one of these, but for the most part, just your team's cohesiveness is one of the things that judges are looking for there. A point of note, and I apologize, I signed in a little bit late today. A little bit worse traffic than I expected. Please don't talk about the core values challenge after you leave the event, because we will use the same core values challenge for all the qualifiers. We'll change it up when we go to semifinals and again when we go to finals. But we don't want to give any teams an advantage by hearing what the core values challenge was a week before others, where otherwise, your team's going to walk in and see it for the first time and, start working right then. But you do not need a...
Oh, and I was just going to give a clarification there that also coaches are not allowed in the core values judging room. That is team members only will be in the core values judging. And then there's probably the clarification on the core values poster. That's often a confusing thing on First Inspires. What they tell you there is that a robot design executive summary and or a core values poster may be required in your region. For Washington State's region, we do not require those items at the qualifier level, which is in December. However, if your team advances to the next level, either to a championship tournament or to the semifinal tournaments, then you will be required to bring with them a core values poster and a robot design executive summary. And the templates for those are on our website. Okay.
Yep. So now we've got a couple questions from Scott. He says, at 8 a.m., can teams' parents go to the pits while the coach is registering, or do they have to wait until the registration is complete?
The team
that may be
goes
above my pay grade.
Yep, we want at the team check-in table, there'll be a table. Only one coach needs to line up in that line. The rest of the entire team, the entourage, the parents, the extra coaches, the cooler, the robot, all of that can proceed directly to the pit area. There will be signage that will help you get there, but it is not required to check in. All they need to know is their team number, because the pits will be labeled with the team number. So send in somebody with the students that knows what that number is. But the coach can be in line all by his lonesome, or her lonesome, to get checked in and provide the roster and the volunteer name if you have it. Good.
Thank you. Next question is, did you say you can get a robot award without doing the project? I believe that discussion was regarding on the fact that you cannot win the robot performance award without doing all 3 aspects. So you actually do need to do all 3. You have to participate in all 3 judging sessions and present a project and demonstrate the core values in some sense to be eligible for awards.
That's correct.
You don't have to, like, if you're stellar in all of those things, you're eligible for the Champions Award. But you could win a robot award, and still have a project. The students might get nervous and might not do a great job on their project presentation. That's okay. They can still win another award. Will the judges wait until after the 3rd round of matches to make their decisions for advancement and awards?
Not likely.
Yes and no. They will see what is available when they're making those discussions, but they're using all of that time for deliberation. They're using all 3 rounds worth of time for deliberation until they've come to a consensus. And normally it takes until about the end of the 3rd round. But, there may be some decisions that are made, halfway through the 2nd round.
And just to be aware,
champion or team that's going to advance.
And in that time period, the judges more highly value a consistent robot. So a 50, 60, and an 80 scores. That's kind of a consistent robot versus a 0, 0, 300. We do have teams that crop up. They might be that team that failed to get any points the first 2 rounds, and then they want to get all the marbles for having a great 1-round robot. The judges certainly have the option to reward that team if they see things happening in the 3rd round, but they are more likely to reward consistency, and that they would know at the end of the 2nd round. So it's not to say they're not looking at the 3rd, but many of the decisions are made because they are looking for well-rounded teams, and that has come out through the discussions all afternoon. So 1 robot score on the last minute of the last round of the last competition is not likely to sway them, but they could have a spotter out there watching just in case if they were waiting for that information. So I hope that clarifies some of that. It is something that typically comes out after a judging session where we have a parent or grandparent with a team at the event, and they are very upset that a decision may have been made earlier in the afternoon and their team was not included. But what they are not weighing is that their team was not included for other reasons already. And the robot score was not a deciding factor, which the judges always have the option to weigh. Are we good?
Yep. I think that's especially less important this year. The threshold of being in the top 75% is a lot easier than being in the top 40%. So, I think more teams are going to be in that discussion anyways. So, there's not going to be as much movement on the 3rd round scores in terms of teams jumping from below the 75th percentile to above it.
That's right.
Moving on, there's a couple questions about volunteers that I don't quite. Susan, I'll let you handle those after I get through some of the robot ones. Maybe you can respond to those in the Q&A box. So the rain lever is needed to push inward towards the center of the table or outward towards the edge of the table. Hold on, I'm at the First Wall Fieldhouse. I'm going to check my master mission model. Push towards the south edge of the field, so towards the middle.
Okay.
So
we like to have an expert on the line.
Can 2 big waters and rain be placed loosely in base and then transported to the water target all at once? Yes, that would be fine. It's important to remember that they must be in contact with the mat to score, or you could have the big waters stacked on each other. But yes, they can be placed loosely in, either on the robot or in front of the robot, as long as it meets all the starting criteria, including the fact that nothing can be over 12 inches tall. You'd be fine. A lot of questions about the height of the short walls. They're 2 by 3, so not quite 3 inches tall. I think it's about 2.5 inches. What should we be expected in the robot judging room? I think we've already answered that. How many kids are allowed at the game table during a match? We allow 2 technicians at a time, but they are more than welcome to switch out. So you can have every student on your team up at the table at some point during the match. You can do it however you want. Spirit sticks, that's well beyond my pay grade. Do kids prepare the team info sheet or a coach? I would think that it should be collaborative. Especially for some of our younger students, they may not have the skills with, editing software to be able to put and organize things the way they'd want to. But I would prefer to see it not just come from the coach. So, the kids can talk about, what they're proud of, what they've worked on. So I think it could be that just like most things in LEGO League, it's an opportunity for a coach or a mentor to help students. Can volunteers expect the day to end at 4:30? Probably not. If you absolutely had to leave at 4:30, we should be done with judging and robot rounds around that time, but that's when we do awards. One of the great things about FLL is that every student has the opportunity to come down and give the volunteers a high five and pick up a medal. And that's a lot more fun if we have a lot of volunteers there for that portion of the event. So if we have a lot of volunteers bugging out at 4:30, it makes the award ceremony, I think, less impactful. So if the only way a volunteer could work is if they left at 4:30, we might be able to make that work. But I generally tell volunteers to expect to stay until on at least 5 o'clock, especially if it's on a cleanup day.
We appreciate anybody who can stay between 5 and 5:30 to help us load out.
Core values boards we already talked about. In the morning when the team is waiting, do they have a table with a challenge map to practice the robot movement? The competition tables are open for practice. Teams are also, there may be general use practice fields at the facility, but not necessarily. So there will be opportunities to practice. Those opportunities will definitely be on the competition tables, which is where I recommend practicing. So yes, but you can't bring in your own field and just like roll it out and make it your little practice tape. That isn't allowed. The entire robot has to be back completely in base before it can be touched by the student. The entire robot must be completely in base when the students interact with it, interrupting the robot to avoid a penalty. If something can go wrong and the students are welcome to grab the robot while it is not completely in base, they will be assessed a penalty. That penalty is only 5 points, so it's relatively small compared to some of the options. So some people may want to take that penalty and try another mission. Questions about the recording will be probably on the
online. Yep. Workshops and webinars.
What size tables are in the pit? That is venue specific. Generally, you're going to get something that is about half the size of a lunch, like kind of a round lunch table, or half the size of a standard folding table. So you have space, but not a huge amount of space.
Yeah, and if they're rectangular, we call them the 6-foot tables. That's what we rent from something like Abby Rents, and they're like not quite 6 feet long and maybe 1.5 feet, not quite 2 feet wide. So whether it's half there.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Is there a robot design at Qualifier?
Yeah, I think I confused somebody here. So the robot design executive summary is a specific document about your robot, and that is required at championship and semifinal tournaments. But every team at the event will be scheduled for a robot design judging session. And this is where they will take their robot, the team will go in and talk to 2 or 3 judges in a room by themselves. It's a 10-minute interview, and there is not a formal presentation. It is more of a conversation and a show and tell. The judges may ask a question such as, what was your favorite mission? Or what was your hardest mission? Or something to get the kids talking, and then they will have a conversation about their robot. And if we have donated tables and field kits, they'll have the opportunity to show their favorite mission, and penalties do not apply during this
unscored
session. Unscored, they are just able to show the judges, maybe they had this really cool thing. It rarely works online, but they really wanted to share it and show it with the judges. So there are 3 robot awards that break out some of the components of robot design, and these are judged based on the questions and answers that the students and the judges have together in that 10-minute session. Plus, there's some judge spotters and things watching the robots on the table to see how the robots are doing. So hopefully that clears up some confusion. Did you find some more game questions?
Can a rainwater on top of a large water in the collection area score the bonus? The mission language is ambiguous. I believe it says 2 big waters. I'd have to look. Give me a second to pull out.
Okay, and one robot
But
match.
I
I'll
think that's
answer
probably
one.
no.
Oh, is that a no? Okay. Looks like he's going to clarify that. But yes, one robot match is 2.5 minutes. The students will have, or the technicians will have a few moments to calmly come to the table, set up their robot to get ready to go. Each of the referees that is working on a table will check in with the technicians and give a good to go signal to the MC or the head ref or whoever's kind of starting off the timer. But we'll have everybody ready at the table. They just need to be doing it in a timely manner. Let's see. The advancement to the semifinals, no, they will need to share the project. The requirements are that the students not only do each area of the program, each of the 3 areas, but that they do all 3 areas of the project itself, which is to find a problem, come up with an innovative solution, and share that solution with someone. So the event is not until, our first event's not till Saturday, so there's still time to share. Sizes and things, I mean, a poster, a lot of people do trifold posters or a single poster that might be taped to the table. There's different options. If you're on this webinar, that means you probably were on the coach email list. But a great resource is to come to the coach Facebook group. That's where you can kind of interact with other coaches. I haven't made a robot poster or a core values poster in a lot of years. And even then I didn't make it. I watched others make it. So you might want to connect with some other coaches who are preparing for tournaments and having some of the exact same stresses that you are having. Looks like, I think you got most of the game questions.
Yeah, I think
if
so.
I missed some of the specific logistical questions, I'm going to go ahead and